Good afternoon, Madam O'Battle. This is the headmaster of Iroko Crest School speaking. The voice buzzed through the phone like a warning bell. Pardon me, Ma, but has Adika come home recently? The words didn't make sense. Home? She echoed, her breath stalling. What do you mean? He's missing. We haven't seen him since yesterday. The world tilted. Her hands turned to ice. That dream, the one where shadows clung to her son's eyes and voices spoke from. Nowhere it hit her chest like thunder. She dropped the phone and screamed. Within the hour, she was tearing down the highway, her driver weaving through honking traffic, her eyes wild and burning red. When they reached Iroko Crest, she didn't wait for protocol. She stormed past the gates like a tempest, straight to the headmaster's office. "Where is my son?" she bellowed. Meanwhile, dawn crept over the ochre roofs of Onuwu Estate, a tranquil enclave nestled in the outskirts of a Hanshi town. The sun painted the land in strokes of amber, and roosters called out from distant yards. Behind a tall rust-red gate edged in bronze vines, the O'Battle household slowly stirred. The home pulsed with quiet order, not noise, but music. In that house lived a boy whose soul would soon set ablaze a truth too powerful to be hidden. His name was Adika Olujimi. He was 10 years old, his skin deep like freshly turned soil, eyes bright and observant like morning stars, and his presence still, but commanding. He was the first son of Madame Salua O'Battle, a formidable entrepreneur who ran a flourishing produce network across 3 states, and Mr. Kalapo O'Battle, a senior oil consultant stationed abroad. Though their pockets were deep, the O'Battle household thrived on discipline, strong spiritual roots, and fierce love. Adika and his younger brother Damji were not just showered with affection, they were molded with intention. Their father, far away in Norway, kept contact through weekly video calls and generous care packages. But it was Salua, their mother, who was the backbone. She had a voice that could silence quarrels or ignite a crowd. Her love was fierce, her rules unshakable. She nurtured her boys like baobab seedlings, sheltered yet shaped. Adika wasn't like other boys. He was quieter, always watching, always learning. He rose before the first cockcrow to pray. He lent the steward a hand without ever being asked. If others cheated on tests, he turned away, even when it made him the odd one out. His teachers called him the prophet without a robe. Yet Salua worried. Not because he lacked success, but because he hadn't faced the world's weight. Ease, she feared, can make a boy's bones soft. She wanted her son to be tried and tempered. That resolve crystallized one hazy Friday when her younger sister Tatai breezed in, wrapped in a swishing anchor print and smelling of chin-chin. Between bites, Salua said, "I'm sending Adika to boarding school, a serious one." Far from here, Tatai raised her brows. "Why not a top school? Close by? You can keep an eye on him these times, you know." But Salua stood firm. That boy carries light inside, and light must pass through fire before it shines its truest. And so, it was settled. 2 weeks of errands followed medical checks, uniform fittings, trunks filled with gari, melo, and pairs of socks. Then came the morning when Adika stood at the gate of Iroko Crest Academy, located in Uzi State, a bastion of elite education, known for sculpting the minds of governors' children and tycoons' heirs. The school was a walled city of routine and control. As the massive iron gates creaked open, Salua held Adika's hand just a second longer. "Never forget who you are," she whispered. He nodded. "I won't, Ma." She walked away, strong. At first, but as the car pulled off, her face crumbled into tears. This was what she'd prayed for, but a mother's heart is not easily soothed. Adika was led inside by a senior student, his metal trunk rattling behind him. His carton of provisions balanced atop a trolley. Iroko Crest looked like a piece of colonial history. The buildings rose like chapels, the grass trimmed like velvet. There was a grand library with arched windows that whispered of secrets, and at its heart, a whitewashed chapel where hymns still lingered in the rafters. He was placed in Basic 7 and adapted quickly. Quiet, sharp, obedient, he excelled. By the time he reached Junior Secondary 3, Adika was 13. He had only two real companions, his doormate, a shy boy who admired Adika but never truly understood him, and his classmate, a bubbly talker who often spoke on both their behalf. Adika didn't isolate himself, he simply refused to conform. While others played rough or chased mischief, he read under trees, prayed in silence, and kept his name far from trouble. But beneath the polished order of Iroko Crest was a hidden world, a secret woven in the lining of school blazers and the hush of certain corridors. There existed a trio of older boys, respected, feared, admired, who were not just students, but members of a darker circle, birthed and bound by a teacher known for his charm and diction. That teacher, Mr. Ayanuga, was beloved by parents and praised in staff meetings, yet behind his spectacles and grammar lay a twisted desire. The boys he mentored had become his pawns, soldiers in an invisible army. And then they noticed Adika. They saw in him something unsettling, something they couldn't touch: purity. It rattled them, not because he boasted, but because he reminded them of what they had surrendered. Mr. Ayanuga saw it too. He warned them. That one, he said, will either kneel with us or destroy us. And so the stage was set. Iroko Crest, a school that gleamed like paradise, was a serpent's den for the unaware. Adika fell into rhythm: morning devotions, roll calls, meals, prep, lights out. But the wind had shifted. The air held something foul. Whispers began to shadow him. Gazes followed him too long. One day, a senior he barely knew approached him after class. "We've had our eye on you," the boy said, smiling oddly. "You're different." Adika blinked and replied simply, "Thank you," then walked away. Days later, another stepped closer. He was tall, with glowing eyes like polished glass and a voice far too gentle for his wide shoulders. He approached Adika outside the chapel. One warm evening, his steps slow, deliberate. "There's a space where boys like you belong," he said softly. "You just haven't found it yet." Adika didn't know what the boy meant, but something curled uncomfortably inside his chest. The encounters kept coming. Odd, unnerving, silent gestures, a folded note in his locker, a sudden invitation to join group walks, subtle glances exchanged. Behind teachers' backs. A senior prefect pulled him aside one day and asked strange things. "Don't you ever feel alone here? Could someone like you hold a secret for others? Can you stay quiet about what people might not understand?" Adika always replied politely, never rudely, but something told him these weren't just innocent questions. The offer was unspoken, but its presence hung in the air like damp heat. They wanted him to become part of something unseen, something that sent warning bells through his bones. So he started refusing, at first gently, then more clearly. He stopped replying to their greetings. At mealtimes he sat alone. He visited the chapel during free periods, even when it was deserted. That's when it all turned. The bullying began quietly. One morning, his mattress was soaked through, dripping when he touched it. Another day, his iba tasted like pure salt. Someone had poisoned his food stash. Then came the locker break-in. His Sunday uniform vanished just before a full inspection. No one saw who did it. No one admitted anything. But Adika knew. The same faces that once wore smiles now watched him in silence during assemblies, their stares hollow and unreadable. They said nothing, but the message was louder than drums. Keep your mouth shut or suffer. The warning became explicit one. Cold evening as he returned from prep class. A folded piece of paper slipped from the vents of his locker. Hands shaking, he unfolded it. 5 simple words: "You talk, you disappear." He stood frozen, the note fluttering like a leaf in his grip. But Adika didn't cry. Instead, he tucked the note behind the back cover of his journal and climbed into bed without a word. Soon after, midterm break arrived, and for the first time in weeks, Adika returned home to his mother, Salua, and younger brother, Dainji. But the boy who returned wasn't the same one she had dropped off. His face looked leaner. His gaze carried weight. Over lunch, Salua reached across the table, her eyes searching. "Adika, are you all right?" He nodded, barely looking up. "I'm fine, Mama," but the way he gripped his spoon said otherwise. That evening, she pressed again. "Is anyone troubling you at school? Tell me the truth. I am your mother." His lips parted, but the words wouldn't come. That warning, "You talk, you disappear," echoed in his skull. And a small voice in him whispered that, maybe, just maybe, they could reach him even here. So he smiled faintly and said, "Everything's okay." That night, Salua watched him kneel longer than usual at the edge of his bed, praying with a face turned skyward, lips moving in whispers. He looked like a boy sending messages into a heaven that only he hoped could answer. Though he slept in his childhood room, though Dainji snored softly nearby, Adika's heart never left Iroko Crest. The very next morning, without being told, he repacked his bag. By sunset, they were back at the school gates. And the moment he stepped through them, he felt it, the weight of eyes, waiting. The break was over, the routine resumed. Students poured back in with noise and gossip. Teachers barked morning greetings. The dining hall buzzed again. But Adika came back carrying a silent war. He spoke even less. He didn't smile in class. His journal filled with page after page of thoughts, prayers, questions. On the outside, he looked calm, even peaceful. But inside, fear had grown still. Enough to hide in plain sight. The seniors noticed. They realized the break hadn't weakened him. He hadn't snitched, not to the school, not to his mother, not even to his two quiet friends. But their patience was running thin. They stopped trying to charm him. No more cryptic smiles. No more hallway invitations. Instead, they began to plan. One humid afternoon, behind the crumbling chemistry block, they met in a shaded corner with Mr. Enuga, the teacher who had birthed the darkness. "He's still resisting," one of the boys whispered. "He won't tell," another added, "but he won't join either." Mr. Enuga's eyes narrowed. Then he smiled a tight, eerie grin. "Then give him a choice he can't refuse. One. That bends him forever." The trap was prepared. The very next day, just after lunch, a well-meaning boy from Adika's class tapped him gently on the shoulder. "Senior Gnosis has to come to the back garden," he said. "The chapel fellowship left something for you. A prayer journal. It has your name on it." Adika hesitated. Prayer journal? From the chapel group? It felt wrong. But the boy's innocent tone disarmed him. And Adika was tired of suspicion, tired of fear. Maybe, just maybe, this time was different. He stood, dusted his pants, and followed the winding path past the chapel. The garden sat in the school's far corner, beyond the stone wall and behind a line of flowering hibiscus trees. It was a sacred place, quiet, peaceful, almost forgotten. Some came here to reflect, others to cry. He turned the final bend in the path and stopped cold. They were waiting. 3 seniors standing in a line like shadows cast at dusk. Behind them, the bushes whispered secrets in the breeze. The air grew heavy. Adika took a step back. What is this? No answer. Another step. Why am I here? Silence. Then they began to circle. The tallest one stepped forward, face twisted. "You think you're better than us?" Another sneered. "God's little favorite, eh?" The third spat near his foot. "We warned you." Adika turned to flee, but a hand yanked his collar. A belt slashed through air. A kick landed, then another. It wasn't loud. It wasn't rushed. It was careful, cruel, planned, punches, words like knives. Blood. Tears. Adika tried to cry out, maybe a prayer, maybe a plea, but a slap silenced him. He fell to his knees. A trickle of blood ran from his nose. You could have belonged. One muttered, we would have protected you. But now, a pause. Then nothing, no movement. He lay there still. They stood over him, panting. Get up, one whispered. But Adika didn't stir. A nudge, no response. They crouched closer. No breath, no pulse. The panic hit like a flood. We have to move him, one choked. They carried his limp body across the back trail behind the classrooms, past the soccer field, to a forgotten fitness corner, now wild with weeds. Under a rusted climbing frame, half-eaten by vines, they laid him down. We'll come back. At night, one whispered, trembling. Then they ran, breathless and wild-eyed, to the only man who had ever held power over their twisted secret, Mr. Ienuga. When he heard the news, he spun around in fury, voice rising like a whip. Idiots, he shouted, slamming his hand against the wall. You were supposed to frighten him, not take his life. The boys stumbled over their apologies, their faces pale with fear. It was a mistake, Master, one of them sobbed. We didn't mean to, but it was already too late. Anuga's fingers trembled as he paced back and forth, panic crawling up his spine. Minutes passed before he turned sharply and hissed, You will meet me there tonight. We will hide. What's been done? We will swear it never happened. And so, beneath the cloak of night and the silence of wind, 4 figures crept to the edge of the abandoned field. Their shovels sliced the earth like blades. They dug fast, with hands shaking and hearts pounding. There were no prayers, no names. Whispered, no tears shed. They placed Adika's still form in the ground like a thing to be hidden, not a boy to be mourned. Under the watching moon, Mr. Ienuga made them kneel. Swear, he said, voice low and cold. Swear this never happened. His name will not pass your lips again. The truth will stay buried beneath this soil. And with bloodless lips they swore. But the earth does not forget, and the wind cannot be bribed. That night, something ancient stirred beneath the trees. 2 days before the world began asking questions, Salua had a dream. She stood in a wide, empty plain, tall grasses whipping. Around her ankles, the wind howled with unnatural strength. In the distance, a voice called her name, soft but urgent. She turned and saw Adika. He was barefoot, standing still, dressed in his school uniform, surrounded by darkness. He said nothing, but his eyes, those deep, pleading eyes, spoke what words could not. She stepped toward him, but an invisible force held her back, cold and strong like iron. As she reached out, the shadows pulled him away, and the wind hissed one line into her soul. Your light is in danger. She jolted awake, drenched in sweat. The digital clock beside her bed read 3:14 a.m. She sat up, whispering prayers into the night, but no words could erase the dread curling in her chest. It's just a dream, she muttered, but her heart knew better. Meanwhile, Iroko Crest continued like nothing was amiss. The chapel bell rang. Boys stretched and grumbled. Beds were made with military precision. Shirts were iron crisp. But Adika's bed remained untouched. His roommate noticed. At first, he assumed Adika had gone to pray early, as he often did. But when he returned from morning devotion and saw the sheets still perfectly laid, unease crept into his chest. He waited through breakfast, then assembly, and even the first class, but no sign of Adika. His classmate and closest friend grew anxious too. Adika never missed class. He was always the first to arrive, his books neat, his smile quiet. But today, his desk sat still, untouched. By second roll call, the teacher's brows furrowed. Adika Olujimi. Silence. He scanned the class. Did anyone see him this morning? Heads shook. A few students exchanged confused glances. One raised his hand. I haven't seen him since yesterday, sir. He didn't come to sleep in the dorm. The form teacher stiffened. Without another word, he left the room and headed straight to the principal's office. Inside, the air shifted. Are you certain he's not in the clinic? Or taken home? My family? The principal asked. Absolutely, sir. No one signed him out. The hostel mistress confirmed it. His bed wasn't used. The principal's face darkened. He reached for the school emergency phone and dialed the number on Adika's file. Salua was at her warehouse supervising the supply audit when the call came. Good afternoon, Madam O'Battle. This is the headmaster of Iroko Crest School. I'm calling to ask, did Adika come home for any reason? Time slowed. Home? She repeated, voice dropping. What are you saying? He hasn't been seen since yesterday, came the answer. The phone slipped from her fingers. The dream, it slammed into her chest like thunder. The shadows, his eyes, the whisper. She screamed. Within the hour, her car tore through city streets, her driver dodging traffic as she cried silently, fists clenched. When they reached the school, she didn't wait for clearance. She stormed the gates, a tempest in heels. She burst into the office. Where is my son? The principal tried to calm her, but she flared. You called to tell me my son is missing, and now you ask me to be calm? Her voice cracked. I saw this. I dreamt this before you even called me. The school fell into hushed shock. Teachers peeked from windows. Students froze mid-step. That same day, she called her husband. Kalapo O'Battle received the news in Canada with shaking hands. By nightfall, he was on the next plane home. He arrived the following morning and went directly to the police with Salua. They filed the report, voices strained with fear. By midday, patrol cars arrived at Iroko Crest. Investigators moved through the school with quiet urgency, checking classrooms, dorms, gardens, even staff quarters. The school's polished exterior cracked. Rumors swirled. Some students wept. Others feared they'd be blamed. The management scrambled to protect its image, urging parents to remain calm, issuing statements. But no one could breathe easy. Something was off, deeply off. In quiet corners, the guilty trembled. Mr. Enuga and the three boys avoided each other's eyes. They watched the gates. Watched the officers. Their mouths were silent, but their eyes screamed. Then came the signs. One boy woke to find damp mud smeared across his bedsheet. Another heard his name whispered from beneath his bed, but when he looked, no one was there. Mr. Enuga saw a dark figure pass behind him in the reflection of a window, though no one stood outside. That night, they all heard it, separately but exactly the same, a breath behind their ears, a voice low and clear. Confess, or no peace. By the fourth day of Adika's disappearance, Iroko Crest had changed. The echo of perfection vanished. Students moved like shadows. Teachers muttered behind doors. The walls held tension like lungs holding breath. Investigators had combed every inch. They found no body, no blood, no clue, but everyone knew something had happened. And the silence was heavier than any truth. The boy with the boldest voice and the proudest smile jolted upright one night. Drenched in sweat, breath caught in his throat, whispering Nathan's name as though it burned his tongue. His roommates stared, frozen, as silence weighed heavy in the air. That same afternoon, seated in the last row during geography class, he glanced out the third-floor window, and there, impossibly, stood Nathan, eyes locked on his, watching, unmoving, until the boy blinked and the figure vanished. The second of them spiraled deeper into terror, refusing meals, haunted by tremors in his mattress and whispers in Nathan's voice. His name called from lockers, under beds, behind dark corners in the lab, till even daylight couldn't shield him from dread. Desperate, he begged to sleep in the staff quarters, but no teacher agreed. The third, once fearless, attempted escape. Backpack slung, face pale, He pleaded illness, but as he neared the school gate, a gust of icy wind rushed past, and in it came the words, "Go and confess," clear, close, and undeniable. He dropped his bag and sprinted back, locked himself in the dorm and sobbed. Mr. Sylvester was not spared. As he passed the old trampoline one evening, the same forgotten corner where Nathan's body had once rested beneath vines, he paused, breath-catching. The weeds were cleared and placed atop. The iron mesh was a pair of school shoes, polished and waiting. That night he dreamed of a gravedigger with ash-covered skin handing him a shovel and warning, "Dig it up, or it will dig itself out." He woke shrieking. By the end of that cursed week, the rot beneath their masks erupted. They no longer looked at one another, avoided mirrors, chapel bells, and the garden, walked like hunted things among their peers. No one said Nathan's name aloud, but his presence soaked every hall. Footprints appeared in dusted corridors, though no one had walked there. Some students claimed soft prayers echoed from empty wings at night. In the dining hall, a bowl of jollof. Rice slid off a table and shattered without a single hand touching it. Then, at morning assembly, the first broke. As the anthem died down and the principal stepped forward, the boy began to shake. His legs gave way, and he collapsed before the school. "I'm sorry," he wailed. "Please, forgive me," gasps echoed. "What are you talking about?" the principal demanded. Through sobs he said it. "Nathan, we didn't mean to. It was an accident. We didn't mean to kill him." The crowd froze. Then chaos. The principal ordered he be removed, and within hours, the other two boys confessed too, separately, each one detailing the same events: the lure, the garden, the ambush, the beating, the shallow grave. Mr. Sylvester tried to flee, but was intercepted. At the gates, wrists seized, handcuffs clicking shut as the entire dorm watched from windows in stunned silence. Justice didn't knock it, broke down the doors. Mr. and Mrs. Wanchuku were summoned to Cedar Heights, and this time they arrived. Hollow dread replacing anger. The campus was too still. Even the birds seemed to hush. Inside the principal's office, an officer spoke gently but without mercy. "Your son is gone." There had been no illness, no escape, no accident, only fists and silence and soil, not strangers. His own school. Her knees gave out, and Abel collapsed into her husband's arms, her wail long and raw, pounding her fists against his chest as if pain could be transferred and lessened. Benjamin said nothing. His eyes brimmed with the agony of a man who had just outlived his child. The police walked them to the garden, now cordoned off. The senior boys, shackled and small, pointed to the old trampoline. Officers knelt and began digging. Within minutes, the smell of death and guilt rose. They uncovered the body wrapped in school bedding, the earth's cold grip having failed to erase what had been done. Abel fell forward, clutching soil, and Benjamin turned his back, hand gripping his chest as though holding himself together. Gently, the police lifted Nathan's remains and slid them into a white body bag. No one spoke. Even the law bowed its head. There was no applause, no triumph. Only the sound of horror being named. In the days that followed, the Wanchuku home became a shrine of grief. Nathan was laid to rest under a blue sky, in a ceremony full of prayers, hymns, and silence sharper than screams. Friends, family, clergy, and neighbors stood dressed in solemn black, their faces wrinkled with sorrow and disbelief. Abel wore white, not for celebration, but as a final act of surrender. Peace, she had whispered, was all she could now give him. Tega, too young to fully grasp but old enough to feel the absence, held her hand the whole time. Meanwhile, justice unfolded swiftly. In court, the boys stood before the judge, heads bowed, chains clinking. Mr. Sylvester, once proud and feared, was gaunt and hollow-eyed. Their families pleaded for mercy. Their only children, they said. But mercy had been buried with Nathan beneath the chapel trees. The judge's voice rang like thunder. "Life imprisonment, all of you." No cheers followed. Because in this tragedy, not even justice could resurrect the light that had been extinguished. Back home, the Wanchaku family mourned for months. Laughter disappeared from the walls. Nathan's room remained untouched, his Bible open on the desk, his journal locked tight in its drawer. Each night, Abel lit a single candle before his photograph, whispering a prayer into the silence. But on the 40th night, she had one final dream. Nathan stood dressed in radiant white, glowing with peace, his face free from hurt, smiling wide. There was no blood, no bruises, just light. He raised a hand not in goodbye, but in release and turned, stepping into brightness. Abel awoke with trembling lips and tear-wet cheeks, but her sobs were no longer sharp. This time they were soft. This time she knew he was home. And so, the story of Nathan is not just a tragedy, it is a calling. A cry to every parent, teacher, and guardian to raise children not only brilliant in books, but fierce in virtue. To teach them that silence before evil is complicity. That light must be trained to shine, especially in darkness. That schools must be sanctuaries, not shadows. Because when the world forgets its duty, the innocent pay with their names written in earth. Let this not happen again. Let us raise children who speak, who see, who stand,